Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. I hope everybody's doing well. And this is a great article, really. It is touching on a lot of different things. There are a lot of parallels going on historically right now. And this is by F. William Engdahl, who's a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And I guess we are that too, as well. But isn't it funny how so many conspiracies end up being very, very rooted in fact? And with everything we're going on, we're going to talk about Earth changes in this video as well. All these things go together. So I forget who we were having a conversation with, but we were talking about how this is such a perfect storm of just so many different things coming together in this big grand confluence of events. And we're talking about obviously the grand solar minimum, the magnetic pole reversal, what is most definitely an economic collapse, a pandemic of epic proportions, whether it's real or not. The consequences are very real. And yet we also have tremendous crop loss because of these earth changes all around the world, of which many of them may be getting magnified through weather wars. And we have the big shift of power from the United States to China. And so he gets into it looking at things historically and looking at what happened in Germany, for instance, in the build up to World War One, and then the consequences after World War One, which led to the build up of World War Two and enabling somebody that's charismatic, and he was charismatic whether we want to admit just how evil or vile or what have you. Many of the most, well, many of the most malevolent dictators in history were charismatic. And when we see what happened with Hitler, and I know there's those out there that don't believe in a Holocaust, but all the people that died as a consequence of the wars. And many believe that he was, well, maybe not too many, but there are those that believe that he was actually fighting the banking cabal. And of course, history is written by the victors, so we have to always take that into account. But there is overwhelming evidence of the the brutality of the Nazi regime. So how could somebody so atrocious as Hitler get into power? Well, it had a lot to do with the psyche of the German nation, and what happened after World War One, how Germany was basically punished, and how their pride was hurt in so many ways. So when you get somebody that knows how to manipulate people by speaking to them and rekindling that sense of pride, of nationalism, well, a really charismatic leader could get people to do or go along with many atrocious things. And history has showed us that that is exactly what happens, and there have been so many leaders like that throughout history. But in this article, he talks about the real powers that be, the powers behind the banking, the cabal, and it's much more than what we would think if we look at it in a limited sense. So he gets into the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, talking all about the fiscal manipulation as well. And it's very, very apparent that they are steering us to another global conflict. And there's reasons why these world leaders would go along with it. And there was an article that was up from Chinese President Xi Jinping asking the Chinese people not to waste food, to realize that we have crop losses and the locust situation. Things are mounting, so he's starting to address the people in a way that has been done in the past. It's time to tighten our belts, basically, so to speak. And talk about tightening your belts, we're probably going to see more things like this, which is really sad. You have 5 horses butchered near a Texas town since May, and police think it was done for food, because they stripped them like you would basically strip meat off of a cow. And so there's people out there already that are in such hardship that they are killing other people's horses, their pets, and their livestock for food. And that will only increase. And all the tensions between the U.S. and China are obviously increasing every hour. And we see fake driver's licenses flooding into the U.S. from China and other countries as well. So that's really interesting. I wonder if any of those belong to any groups, like perhaps Antifa or others. And meanwhile, we have the earth changes just ongoing. And we see a powerful derecho, which basically is a storm with straight line winds that have winds that can be hurricane strength, and in this case up to 100-mile-an-hour winds. Went across the Midwest. This was one of the worst weather events of 2020 and knocked out power to 1 million people at the peak. It did a lot of damage and actually spawned tornadoes. And so this happened throughout eastern Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois as well. Widespread damage. It's all part of the ramping up of what we're going to see more and more of as we get deeper and deeper into this cycle. And many people have done a great job, including our good brother Mark over at Wages World, following the sun, as Sassy's she's getting on guard here. She hears the dog out there. Following the activity of the sun's starting to wake up. And the magnetosphere decline is going to make it so that even minor activity is going to have a more major effect. So at least 7 tornadoes touched down in the greater Chicago area because of this storm, as we see some of the damage that it caused. And unfortunately, we will probably see quite a bit more of these type of storms as time goes on. As this tweet doesn't want to load there, you see a car that had a bad day with the tree coming down on top of it. And not just over here in the U.S., also over in Greece, you have tremendous storms going on. And in this last batch of storms, we have over 3,000 people affected, 3,000 properties damaged, 12 inches of rainfall. That's the type of thing that we see now on a regular basis. 80% of the annual rainfall. 12 inches in one storm, 15 inches is typical for the annual. So obviously, things are not typical anymore. And this storm was named Thalia, caused 2 rivers to burst its bank as well. And again, don't chance things when you think you can cross the river. Kind of looks like a flying saucer got stuck over there, doesn't it? That's interesting. And thanks for your patience as this takes longer to load with our connection. So we have twin atmospheric rivers over in Australia. This is really rare, but the really rare is becoming much and much more common. And in fact, when we look at what else was going on in Australia, we see New South Wales was hit by strong winds and the worst flood in 29 years. Again, records are breaking everywhere we look. And we have Sinabung, which is in Indonesia, firing a thick cloud of ash up to 30,000 feet. Sinabung is pretty active, turning the sky black in the middle of the day. So wait till we see something on a much larger scale. That will definitely significantly add to the cooling effect that we will see coming. Now, just a little update. The man that was shot by officials, by police, over by the White House, where we had talked before, where the president got not really rushed off stage, but slowly sauntered off stage. It seems like perhaps he really was more of an isolated, crazy person, or maybe he was under some sort of influence. But his name is Myron Basil Berryman, 51, of Forestville, Maryland. Seems that he was out there just basically making threats and they don't even know if he really had a gun. He made a motion like he went to kneel and shoot at officers, and they shot him. Uh, Not a good move. Not a move necessarily a sane person would make. So you really have to wonder if he was under some sort of chemical influence or some sort of other influence. So if you guys get a chance tonight, go out and check out the skies. We're going to have the Perseids meteor shower going on. So be aware of that. Maybe you'll catch something beautiful and interesting, or maybe a UFO will go by. There's definitely a lot of those up in the air. Or maybe you could catch some of Elon's satellites as well. And so this is going to be out of Urban Survival Site. And it's going to be things you need to do before the election. Number one, build an intelligence community. If things get bad enough, survival is going to require joining a group. You just can't stick this out alone as a lone wolf, because you're not going to last. So building a community is something a lot of people I know are very, very looking into and doing. It's sometimes easier said than done, because think about different personalities, and think about different personalities in stressful situations. So you really have to be careful about who you get involved with. Really, really vet them very well. Get a 1-year supply of food, at least, if not more. Prepare for the fires of, when the shit hits the fan. And, obviously we've had tons of riots going on. Portland, Seattle, other places as well. Really globally. Put survival gear into your bug out vehicle. Learn prepper radio communications. That's a good skill to have. Learn primary disaster preparedness concepts as well. And beef up your home security. And then prepare for the pandemic to get worse. Unfortunately, we have to prepare for it to get worse, even if it doesn't really get worse, but it is in the media is getting worse for whatever reasons they might have, as I'm sure you guys are well aware of. As we were saying in the last video, it does feel like New Mexico is definitely amped up a lot more than, say, what we saw in Arizona, or say Nevada, but at the same time California, very, very strict on everything, as is New York. So each state is different. Think about where you really want to be when it really gets bad, and when we are really cut off from each other and the power just goes out and doesn't come back maybe for 6 months. So have all those things in mind. Want to thank you guys so much for your support on Patreon and Ko-Fi. As always, guys, be prepared. God bless, and namaste.